you recently wrote a book that basically tells us the story of Romania's integration into European Union. 15 years of membership in the European Union, and we have the cooperation and verification mechanism lifted recently, but also a blunt refusal for Romania to join the Schengen area. What does the context look like now for Romania 15 years after the integration?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for this kind invitation for the interview. And I had yesterday the great pleasure in Cluj to present the book. And actually, it's so to say the second edition, because the book initially came out in English and now the Romanian version is available. And I'm very grateful also to the editor who made all the efforts. That it happened by coincidence yesterday at my birthday. So that was a nice coincidence. And I have the pleasure tonight having another event here in Timișoara. And coming back to your question, yeah, I was saying yesterday, and so did the president of the local branch of the Romanian Academy, it's a bit sad that there were no celebrations for having achieved your membership and already being for 15 years in the Union. But I also understand totally that there is still a feeling of, how did Professor Puskás yesterday say, we are still a bit of second-class member. And certainly this late lifting of the mechanism that was especially invented for Romania and Bulgaria feels still deeply sad with those who were doing all the negotiation efforts. And equally, the refusal that came at a very late hour in November last year when I was in Bucharest presenting the English edition, again, coincidence of events, feels like another slap in your face. Now, we all know, on the other hand, that your country over these years, already into the years of acceding to the Union, has made huge achievements, especially in the economic area. And quite honestly, I've been in the country when the mandate of your first commissioner, Mr. Orban, started, Leonard Orban, for whom I have had the pleasure to work. And I compare now coming back, it is amazing. The differences are really amazing. And wherever you are, and it's not only Bucharest, it's even when you go to other areas. So a lot has been achieved, and yet the discussion is ongoing, and I have all understanding for it. Are we really recognized as an equal partner? Is our voice heard enough? Yeah, that is a complex question, and certainly also seeing now that you are facing similar discussions that you see in France. Are certain jobs well enough paid with the strike of the teachers, hotly debated, as I understand? You are in a very similar situation than many others, but let's not forget that unfortunately your country is already very hardly hit by the war that is happening, so to say, next door to your front, with the aggression of Russia against Ukraine, and having quite an impact on the stability of the political system, on the media landscape, and many other factors around. So in conclusion, yes, you made it. And the title of the book actually is a quote from one of the interviewees who very clearly said, if you wouldn't have made it happen in 2007 to be a member, which fortunately was achieved, you wouldn't be in today. And just imagine that in this current global situation, you not being a member of the Union. I don't want to imagine this. So I would say congratulations.
It was the last time when the European Union doors was opened.
At that moment, yes. And strangely, looking at the current discussions, what to do with the Balkan countries, I'm actually attending on Friday here a conference about the security challenges in the region, and also looking at the newcomers like Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. I feel that everybody sees again this moral obligation, the historical momentum on the one hand, and at the same time also realizing that Brussels may not be ready, the existing member states may not be ready to take them in, but time is playing against them, and against those who are, for good reasons, probably weighing the option, what would it mean to take another 6, 7, 8, 9 members into the Union, whatever the timeline might be. It will be a complicated process, that is very clear, and quite some reforms would be necessary. But everybody is a little bit afraid. How do you go about it?
Are you confident about Moldova, for example?
Well, I think at this moment it would be far too early to say at which point they would have a chance to come in. And to be very frank with you, I'm known to say things as I see them. Issues that we have also in existing member states, and that goes well beyond the known cases of Poland and Hungary. And I'm speaking, of course, about the rule of law. They are still big challenges in those countries that are aspiring to accede to the Union. So we cannot put a blind eye to this. We cannot allow that we are falling again in a situation where members are exceeding, certainly making their best efforts to apply to the rules, but then later on, once they are in, we found out and enter into very complicated discussions how to heal situations that are more difficult to address once you are a full member of the Union.
Because you have mentioned Poland and Budapest, how did Romania manage to avoid an illiberal regime?
Yeah, I found this question really fascinating. I would have to be much more here in the country, on the ground, to say how you managed to do this. And yeah, again, a reason to salute this country, that you haven't fallen into this trap. And I know that certain changes here also in the judicial system were not easy to swallow, and have certainly created a lot of hefty debates also in Parliament, but somehow it was achieved. Now, it is true that the question of the fight against corruption, bracket open, very clearly, it's not a particular problem of Eastern Europe, it's not a particular problem of Romania or any other country. This is a problem that needs constant attention, and we have scandals in existing very old member states too, but that you were brave enough at the time, the very much debated institute to fight the corruption, to set it up and go through the motions, even to have arrests into the political ranks, that created very fierce discussions. I'm well aware of this, but that was a very brave move, and in the end, no government, wherever they came from, attempted completely to abolish this or to come with some invented new legislation that would hamper their efforts to do the work they are supposed to do.
You know, there are many European leaders like the French President Emmanuel Macron who are talking about this two-speed European Union, or an European Union of concentric circles. How does it look, the unity of European Union?
Yeah. Now, first of all, this whole idea of having different speeds in Europe is not a new one. It was not invented by the French president. It was actually an old idea that goes back to Wolfgang Schäuble in Germany. So, long time ago, we had already a discussion. Let me start with some other historical facts. Into the acceding process of the 10 countries, then including Romania and Bulgaria, the 12 countries. So we are in the year 2000 onwards. There was a intensive discussion already in the Commission, in the capitals. What does it mean if we are now enlarging from 15 to 20, then 27? How do we organize ourselves internally? From the question of Is there always one commissioner per country, or can it be something different? So all sorts of models were discussed to keep the efficiency in the institutions, realizing that none of them was good enough to reply to the needs of the countries being represented when decisions are being taken. A very crucial question. So discussions how to organize a much bigger body has been forever. I understand that certainly challenges in this bigger group, also because of the diversity of countries, continues. So models are coming and going, so to say. So the idea of having different circles seemingly goes against the unity of the Union, as you rightly were saying in your question. On the other hand, we have already a kind of different circles when you think about the Schengen area. I know this is a nagging point for your country. When you think about the Eurozone, and if you think about other exceptions that certain member states have in the judicial cooperation. So we are not completely unified in all areas. However, what is now on the table is being discussed even in the Brussels circles and in capitals very differently. Some are saying this makes a lot of sense, also eventually over time to give a chance to Great Britain to come closer again to the Union. But others are, of course, afraid that this is the ever-waiting room with no clear perspective. When do you become a member? Because in the book, there is also a wonderful quote from the former Secretary General of the Commission, Catherine Day, who said, of course, it is a complex question of the stick and carrot policy that is often being applied during the accession negotiations, basically offering support, the possibility in the future to gain even more advances when you are a full member, and at the same time, this strict insistence that the rules are being applied. Let me add one more sentence in this context. There is a huge difference what you have to do in the accession process, meaning to turn all the directives from Brussels into national law. But the difficulty lies much more in application on the ground, meaning also the last local official who needs to deal with certain questions needs to understand what does this mean, and what does this mean in terms of changes. It affects economic operators. Vasil Puskás rightly was saying, and Leonard Aumann perfectly copied that remark, that most time of the explanation they had to do during the negotiation phase was back home, was explaining to economic operators, to local administration, where are the changes, how do they affect them. But once again, and I close here, this is nothing unique for a country like Romania. I was many years ago in Germany trying to explain what the latest change of the rules for public tenders means for people on the ground. And it was not an easy task.
Even now, I don't know how strong is in Romania this Eurosceptical current, let's say it.
Well, there I'm not too much concerned. I just yesterday evening was reading an analysis of recent polls. I know polls are always questionable. Are they really representing? However, people are making the point, people here from Romania having asked their own citizens, certainly under the impression of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, there is a very positive pro-European feeling. Of course, you have a country, you have a party in the country that plays a very different card. They have their, I don't know, around 15% of voters. This is probably something a democracy has to accept and to live with. But the vast majority, to everything I can see and hear, is very much in favor of the Union. Having said this, I heard even yesterday over the lunch discussions, that there would be the wish that there is a bit more openness in Brussels to your arguments when it comes to questions of defense, or maybe also some other questions that are being discussed in Brussels, and are sometimes, certainly when you go here to more rural areas, seem very far away from the living situation of the people on the ground.
You know, there is another ongoing debate in European Union about the unanimity rule on voting. Do you think it should be redefined, discussed at least?
Well, the discussion, I think, is necessary. Maybe it comes at a difficult point in time, because we know that not all countries, at least, you see, here comes already this fine semantic. We always speak about countries, but in countries, we, of course, in these discussions mean the governments. And the governments, like in any democracy, and that even includes Hungary, only represents a certain part of the population and not the whole country, fortunately. But coming back to my point, a discussion is maybe necessary, but it comes at a difficult point, because we are certainly in foreign policy, we are not where we should be at this point. We don't have even a baseline that every country shares and every government is willing to support. Of course, everybody realizes unanimity slows down discussions. Just think about the lengthy discussions about every sanction package. It's sometimes a painful discussion, and if somebody raises the hand, and it's not always the country we were mentioning, it's also others. I hear now the latest sanction package, there is opposition inter alia by Greece for a certain reason. So everybody can hold up the process. And as you painfully noticed in November last year, the stop of the almost agreed accession to Schengen for your country and neighboring Bulgaria was an internal matter of politics in Austria. Yeah. So it is more and more felt that we are tying our hands in having more speedy decisions. But the discussion should have come at a different point, where it doesn't look like we want to basically harm now certain countries which have been a pain in those discussions. That is maybe not the right point, but we need a discussion about it. We need also to be aware that this will create opportunities inside countries, be it by the government or be it by strong opposition parties, to say, look, here we are. We are just overrun. We are even not heard. Yeah. I understand the reason for the discussion. It will be very complex to convince that majority decisions also in this area are necessary. Because let's face it, if we are going down that road, we are closer to redefining what this union is. Is it a cooperation of individual member states, or is it something different? And we had the discussion before. It was unfortunately voted down at the time by the French and Dutch voters when we had the constitutional discussion. So maybe, time will show. I don't know where the discussion goes. Honestly, I don't know.
We have these questions here in Romania, also in Bulgaria. Ivan Krastev, the Bulgarian political scientist, wrote about it. What mattered the most in this ex-communist countries' acceptance into the EU? Was there a kind of moral debt that the West felt it owed to the East? That's a very strong word, but Elmar Brok actually in the book was saying so that we felt a moral obligation to take you in and to help you get up and do the approach and process, also gaining the necessary economic strengths. And equally, we all know that also now the discussions around how to support the Balkan countries and Ukraine and others
is, of course, in view of their situation being overrun with propaganda and overrun with seemingly interesting proposals. Think of China's engagement here, but in the end, not prospering the country and bringing any positive elements for the people on the ground. Yes, there is this moral obligation that was also at the time. And let's not forget that there was unfortunately some bloodshed, but in global terms, seeing the vast amount of population that was affected, it was an amazing peaceful change. Yeah, of course, I know what happened in your country. Still, it had nothing to do with revolutions we have seen before, where many more people were suffering. And yet, I fully understand there is a feeling that many people, so to say, were losing out because the changes were too fast, sometimes too radical for people to follow. Economically, it was not always as easy as thought for. But quite honestly, this is like the famous question we have also in Germany of the reunification, where there are also some bad feelings until today about the effects. What would have been the alternative? Yeah, I simply don't see it, because coming back to what we said before, stick and carrot, can you keep somebody forever in the waiting room? No, you can't, because that person will turn around. Let me make one last point in that context. I found it actually a shocking situation that after the last meeting of the so-called BRICS states, there were 20 countries saying, oh, maybe that's the better opportunity for our future. So I would say we Europeans lost something out, that those countries are turning now to a cooperation that I would at least say is questionable in terms of their prospects long term, rather than us engaging in these countries and offering them a partnership.
It is my last question. Where do we still need to work? Where Romania still need to work in order to reduce the gap with which we entered this process of European Union integration?
Well, again, I'm very careful because I'm not living on the ground here, but it is clear that there are certainly still challenges in your market economy to be achieved here. I understand that some people feel that the connections between the different parts of the country, especially for the economic operators, are not ideal. There, potentially, Europe could still help, but it's probably also an effort here inside the country. There are issues around climate change that will become pressing sooner than later. My understanding from specialists is that certain parts of the country in 20, 30 years from now, which seems far and on the other hand is not, might become really deserted areas because they are not anymore regions where you can properly live. So this needs forward planning and ideas how to either mitigate these areas or not. And yeah, there is continuous efforts, and I think your diplomats are doing a great job there in Brussels to also make your voice heard and form alliances with other countries. It's always better in Brussels to come in a package with other countries and make your arguments rather than being completely on your own. That makes it always a bit harder to sell your point.
But not in with Visegrad countries, because Romania avoided this Visegrad group.
Yeah, it's not up to me to say which group of countries, and Visegrad, in my humble view, doesn't really exist anymore. There is so much division between the countries. But maybe there will be a new Eastern Alliance. I could perfectly see that more contacts by Bulgaria and Romania together with Poland and the Baltic states. Yeah, so a bit the new borderline to a difficult neighbor could make sense, could create also beneficial cooperation ideas. I know it is not all so easy. The situation in Poland is certainly under the impression of the upcoming elections. You have your own elections. So maybe it needs a bit more time. And when the dust has settled, it's time to work on those issues. And of course, I see the huge engagement of your country already to support the Republic of Moldova in their aspirations and efforts to understand what their future in the European Union might mean. And that is much appreciated.
Thank you very much. It was a great talk.
Thank you for your time.